And we're back in the car wearing our Teddy KGB shirt like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your hopefully happy hump day early evening here with me in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. So according to Facebook, because this is the kind of thing that as much as I have an unusually good memory, I would not have remembered this particular date offhand. But according to Facebook, April 23rd, 2009 represents the first New York Yankees game that I attended at the new stadium. Like the actual new stadium, not game 2, 1976 in April, where everyone was calling it the new stadium when in fact it was old Yankee Stadium, just done up real nice. More than real nice. They practically blew the place up and rebuilt it, but the point is it was not really a new stadium. It was a retrofitted, renovated stadium. On April 23rd, 2009, my dear old dad and I went to the first Yankee game that he and I attended together in almost 3 years. Now, because we went to so many games, thanks to my exceedingly privileged, very lucky childhood, that was probably the longest gap that we had ever had between attending games together. And I don't know, it's just the way that it worked out. Part of it was that his firm, which was SCF & Co., they had season ticket plans over the years, some of which they had better seats than others. But when SCF & Co. ceased to be a going concern, he didn't have any special access to tickets after that. They merged with a bigger firm, and he occasionally would go to games, but the last game that we went to together, which I believe was August 6th, or maybe it was August 7th, it was something in the first or second week of August of 2006. And the company that he was with, it's not a big deal, it was Citron Cooperman. They're an absolute monster. His firm merged in with Citron Cooperman, the partner, Joel Cooperman, Niall Citron, nice guys, whatever. But they had corporate boxes which were in the mezzanine of the old park. And that was the first Yankee game that I attended at the stadium since a loss, which was game 1 of the 2004 ALDS against the Minnesota Twins, where we lost to, I believe, Johan Santana. I think Johan pitched game 1. I could be wrong about that. But I didn't go to any games in 2005. And in 2006, my dad, on this random, brutally hot, it was the hottest day of 2006. This is something you could fact check me on. The Yankees played the Blue Jays, and it was the hottest day of the year. It's certainly the hottest I ever experienced a Yankee game. Now, the thing, if you don't know what it means to be in the mezzanine, you have a lower deck, you have an upper deck. The mezzanine is the middle deck. Dear viewers and dear listeners, that's what it means. So, if you have a day, let's just say, where it is 95 degrees outside, it's really good to be sitting in the mezzanine, because then you're just hot. You're not hot with the sensation that the sun is burning you to a crisp. So, the last game that Dad and I went to at the old ballpark, after so many games, starting with game 2 in 1976 April, and here we are. Now, we knew that the stadium was only going to have 2 more seasons. 2008 was already slated by that time to be the last season of old Yankee Stadium. We didn't know that we weren't going to go to any more games, even though Dad no longer had a piece of a plan. He wasn't the sort of personality who would go out of his way to just buy tickets. Every once in a great while, he would say something, he'd watch on TV, boy, I wish we were at the ballpark today. But it didn't motivate him to action. I don't remember him ever really teasing it or like, hey, Jared, what do you say we get tickets to Sunday's game? He was okay watching it on TV, and by that time, he was in his 60s. By 2006, he'd already suffered the terrible hip and back injuries, which unfortunately would define, more or less the last 15 years of his life. But what I remember about that particular day, it was so hot that George Steinbrenner, the Yankees, they were nervous about fans potentially fainting. Like, that's how hot it was. They actually gave out free bottles of water. And reason, when you know how Yankee Stadium, old or new, it exists solely to make people spend as much money while they're at the ballpark as humanly possible and then some. The fact that they gave out free water to anyone who asked for free water, it shows you how fucking oppressive it was. So I remember sitting there, and it was an easy win. A little bit of a historical marker. The Yankees had just made a, at the time, somewhat controversial trade with the Philadelphia Phillies. They got Il Como Dulce, Bobby Abreu, as sweet as candy. They got Bobby Abreu, and they got a pitcher who unfortunately was ill-fated. He didn't live very much longer, Corey Lytle, who died in a plane crash in the offseason between, I think between 2006 and 2007. I'm pretty sure about that. Not long after the season ended unceremoniously with them getting the shit kicked out of them by a not very good Detroit Tigers team. But there are certain days in our lives that we remember what things felt like. Not just remembering flashes, images, but remembering what things felt like. And I remember, even sitting in the mezzanine, it was impossibly hot on that August day. It was so hot that, I mean, this is embarrassing. I told my dad as we got to our seats, can we go home? That is how uncomfortable I was in the shade. So imagine, and I remember seeing people on the third base side, you know, the lower tank, and the first base side. They were roasting out there. I mean, when I tell you they were turning into lobsters before our eyes, it was crazy. So the game itself was a very easy win. Jason Giambi hit a 3-runner in the first inning, and the Yankees they just coasted their way through. And Corey Lytle, in his first start with the Yankees, pitched great. I mean, he was fantastic despite the heat, despite the weather. I could still feel the steam coming off the cement, you know, where our seats were. I can't really even describe how uncomfortable of a day that was. But we didn't go to another game until April 23rd, 2009. So, you know, 31 or 32 months later at the new stadium. And the game itself was an exciting game. 16 years ago today. That's just absolutely insane that it's that long ago, but 16 years ago today, my first time at the new stadium. Now, when the new stadium was getting ready to open, my dad did, on his own, because he had long retired by that point, he was still, I guess, doing a little bit of part-time kind of consultant, they called it consultancy work, with Citron Cooperman, but he was more or less, he wasn't really going into the office much. He was plugged into the network. He could get a lot of stuff done at home that, let's say, a decade earlier, it wasn't even possible to do that as technology improved. High-speed internet, broadband, etc. So he bought a piece of a season ticket plan himself this time. He spent $1,000, $1,500, didn't do anything nuts. And he got seats in the upper deck in the 300s, good seats, but he didn't really have the need to go to more than, 6, 8, 10 games. I don't remember the exact amount of games that he had, but this was the first game that he had of that season. And he, Jerry, you want to go to the game with me? Yeah, of course, Dad, let's go to the game. I mean, I'm already 35 at the time. It's not like I'm a little kid. He's still asking me because I'm his son, would you like to go to the game with me? Yeah, sure. So they played the A's, and it was one of those days where we weren't sure we were even going to go because the forecast called for scattered showers, right? We love that when they say scattered showers. What the fuck does that mean? It means that it's probably going to rain, but they're not exactly sure. Is it going to be continuous? Is it going to be a steady drizzle for 6 hours? Or will it be actually scattered showers? But we decided, whatever, we'll go. We'll just take our chances. We'll go to the ballpark. Now, in my New York Yankee viewing, seeing games in person, in my sort of career as a New York Yankees fan, I've seen a lot of walk-offs. Relative to the number of games I've been to, just in general, I've seen a lot of walk-offs. There was a game in '85, Yanks versus Red Sox, where the Yankees were down a run going into the 9th inning, and they ended up winning on a walk-off walk. I love that, a walk-off walk. They didn't call it that 40 years ago. And then as far as walk-off home runs, I saw a walk-off home run in 1986, Dan Pasqua hit the ball out of the ballpark to win a game in '86, and Roberto Kelly hit a walk-off home run in 1990 to win a game. And then the game that I talked about in the episode about the 1991 Yankees, when the franchise, even though that season sucked, they started to sort of turn things around because Bernie Williams made his debut and they drafted Derek Sanderson Jeter. That was really the turning point. Those two elements, the fact that Bernie Williams, who was a huge prospect, ended up actualizing his potential and more, and the fact that Derek Jeter inexplicably fell into their lap in the next draft after 1990, in the 1991 season, I should say, the next possible draft. But the most exciting walk-off that I saw was in June of 1991. It was a game between the Yankees and the Rangers. It was not a walk-off homer, but a game that was tied in the bottom of the ninth inning, and with a man on second and 2 outs, Donnie Baseball himself, who recently celebrated his 64th birthday, as I talked about, Donnie Baseball hit a walk-off single, Steve Sack slid around the tag, and the place went fucking crazy. Well, the third and final, at least to my memory, walk-off home run that I saw took place on the day of April 23rd, 2009. The game between the Yankees and Athletics went 14 innings. It was a very sloppy game, and as much as I make fun of the meteorologists of the day, they kind of got it exactly right, because there are pictures from that day where it's sunny, and there are pictures where it appears to be raining, and then it actually was raining. I don't think the game was ever interrupted by rain, but it rained that day nevertheless. Now, as much as I am sad, and I talked about this in the Yankee Stadium episode on April 18th, which was the 102nd anniversary of when OG House That Ruth Built, the original stadium, opened April 18, 1923. I am upset that the old park was torn down. I'll never get over that. It's just the reality of being the kind of fan that I was, and the memories that were formed in that park, the ghosts, the hallowed field, all of that stuff. I mean, it sounds stupid if you're not really a fan, but if you are, you take this stuff seriously. And, you love the moments in pop culture. There are a lot of moments, even in famous movies, that are very much products of their time and don't land anymore. So speaking of my Teddy KGB shirt, there's a moment in the movie Rounders. It's towards the end of the first act when Matt Damon's Mike McDermott is, he's doing some work for John Turturro's Joey Knish. He's driving the truck. He's making deliveries for him, are trying to earn an honest living to put himself through law school at that point in the film. And he goes into a, nice deli, probably somewhere near Midtown Manhattan. And an actor that I like, who was in a number of movies in the 2000s, including War of the Worlds. He's the guy who Tom Cruise has the quick argument about, where he says, "Get in the car, Manny, or you're going to die." Lenny Venito is the name of the actor. So Matt Damon walks into this deli and he's, getting ready to deliver stuff. And the clerk, who's played by Lenny Venito, they start saying, "Oh, Mike, how you doing?" And they go back and forth. And then the clerk goes, "Let me ask you something, Mike," because he knows he's a law student. He says, "Can fucking Steinbrenner just fucking move the Yankees?" Now, in 1998, there was talk that Steinbrenner might actually just fucking move the Yankees. So the fact that we even got a new stadium in the Bronx, in certain quarters it was looked upon as a bit of an upset, because they're joking about it in 1998, and Matt Damon, as Mike McDermott makes a joke, he says, "Well, I don't actually know. We don't get to Steinbrenner until next term." And the guy actually acts like that's a real answer. He's just fucking with him, because how could he possibly answer that question? But even though the old ballpark was torn down, the new park was gorgeous. And it's not as if they didn't put an incredible amount of effort into reconstructing the old park as much as possible. They built it across the street. They literally built it across the street. From certain areas of the new park, you would not be able to tell the difference. If you took me at a game in 1998 and just transplanted or transported me into the future to 2009, I would not automatically say, "Where the fuck are we?" It might take me a while. It might take me more than a little while to figure out, hey, wait a minute, is this even the same park? The views of the outfield are a little bit different. I'm the kind of person that probably would not have hit me. There are other people immediately would have said, "Oh, this is the subway out there looks different," or whatever they might say. But they did a great job trying to keep the history. And there were actually more historical kind of artifacts in the new park. They didn't have enough room in the old park. One thing that I always wished that I had gotten to do at the old park was visit Monument Park. And I am ashamed to say I still have never been to Monument Park because they took it from the old place. Of course, they weren't going to get rid of that, to the new place, with the retired numbers and the monuments. It's a little bit, they used to call Yankee Stadium the Cathedral of Baseball. To call it that now is not really, it's not correct because it's across the street. It's a different structure. And that was the joke when Joe Torre, whenever he was asked to comment on the Yankees, and people, they're not like me. They're not savants when it comes to these things. And they say stuff like, what's it like being back here? And Joe Torre, not trying to be a schmuck, he says, I never managed here. Duh. He doesn't say duh, but that's kind of an obvious point. He managed across the street at the old ballpark. So the food is a lot better. It was a lot better. It's the first thing I noticed, the choice of the menu items and everything. Dad and I, we got sub sandwiches, and we saw an exciting game. It was a good game, and winning on a walk-off home run is a special thing. I know people that have gone to dozens of games that never have seen a Yankee walk-off, and walk-off homers are very elusive with an E, because you can go through years with the Yankees where they had big teams and didn't have any games that ended on a home run. And then there were years like the 1991 team, for example, where the team really wasn't that good and they had 3 walk-off homers. It doesn't even make sense, but shit happens. It's baseball, Susan, as I like to say, or like John Sterling would like to say. But seeing the game with Dad, and as much as it's a cliche, it is a sport that there is, to me, more of a father-son kind of a component, or there's the potential for it, more so than football, more so than basketball or hockey. And we went to a lot of games over the ensuing years. Unfortunately, I didn't go to any of the postseason games in the, 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, when the Yankees were still good enough. They made all those postseasons. They only went to the championship series in 2010. That was a bad loss. They lost a really lousy series to the Texas Rangers. Really, they had all the fairy dust during the Torre era, the first part of it from 96 to 2000. They got so many lucky breaks. Holy shit. They got so many lucky breaks in the Torre era. I can admit that. And unfortunately, karma came collecting. Eventually, they were not going to get all those breaks, and things were going to go wrong. Stupid things, blue pits when they were getting all the blue pits, etc., etc. Mariano Rivera proving to be mortal in 2001 and 2004. Joe Torre making weird decisions with how to deploy Mariano in the 2004 ALCS. A lot of stuff went wrong. But the Yanks ended up winning the World Series in the first year of the new park in 2009. And so, for those who missed the 23 episode, you look at the history of Yankee Stadium and the remodeled stadium, which reopened in 76. It's known in Wikipedia as Yankee Stadium 2, because it's not the same as the original park, even though it was rebuilt using the existing structure. But in the 1923 Yankees, that's the first World Series championship, was that year, the first year of the new stadium. And then the remodel, where the Yanks played 74 and 75, had good teams. They almost actually made a run at the American League East in 74. If there had been a wild card, they would have gone to the playoffs in 74. They would have gone to the playoffs in 1970. The team didn't go to a postseason for 12 years, but it didn't mean that they were terrible for 12 years. It just meant that they didn't win the division. That was the only road to the postseason. Either you won your division, or you're on the golf course the next day. But the first year of the remodeled old stadium, in 1976, they had a huge season. They won the American League East. It was close. The Orioles had a big team that year. It was close, but the Yankees more or less led wire to wire. It was not a lot of pressure on them. And they won the famous Kansas City series, where Chris Chambliss hit the walk-off. Speaking of walk-offs, right? That's top 3 most famous walk-offs in the history of baseball, up there with Bobby Thompson. I don't know what the third one would be. Would it be Joe Carter? I don't know. In the World Series to end the 93 World Series. I don't know. But the Yankees then lost the World Series. They got fucking smashed by the Big Red Machine, the Cincinnati Reds of Johnny Bench, Joe Morgan, and Pete Rose. So 2009, the Yanks had a little bit of a down year in 08. They played okay. They almost got to 90 wins. Again, worth repeating, under the current format, that 2008 team would have gotten at least a 3-game series the way that they're doing it now. They're not really doing the knockout game anymore. They would have gotten into the postseason. But 2009, they reshuffled the deck. They signed 3 big money free agents, one of whom is probably a Hall of Famer. The other was very close, and the third guy, unfortunately, was past it by the time he got to the Yankees. They signed A.J. Burnett. That was the guy who was past it. They signed You're on the Mark Teixeira, who I absolutely loved. I mean, Teixeira, if he had not gotten hurt and had such a catastrophic injury in 2015, I mean, he could have gotten to 500 homers. He could have punched his ticket to the Hall of Fame. It's kind of unfortunate. He wasn't that old when he retired. And CC Sabathia, who everybody adores. I don't know anybody who ever talked about baseball or was a fan of baseball who didn't love CC. It was a guy who was willing to pitch hurt. And when he was with the Brewers that year, he's going on 3 days rest, even though he's got huge contract over. He said, give me the fucking ball. I'm going to pitch. And the Yankees had some down moments earlier in that year, but they ended up, they had a huge rally from June 4th. I think they won 105 games. It was the most games that any Yankee team had won since the kind of fabled, speaking of Torrey, the 98 squad, which most people consider to be the 3rd best team in Yankee history. You ain't putting it over the 27 Yankees, regardless of the record or the winning percentage. That's 27 Yankees of Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig and Bob Musial and Herb Pennock and Wade Hoyt and all of these incredible, legendary all-timers, Tony Lazzeri. And we're not putting them ahead of the M&M boys of 1961 who won 109 games, the Mick and the Jolly Roger. 2009 Yankees, though, they had kind of a tough series in the first round against the Minnesota Twins, but they ended up sweeping that series. They always beat the Twins like a tin drum, the proverbial tin drum back then. And then they won a pretty tough series, a 6-gamer against the Angels. The Angels had their moments. The Yanks were in trouble in one of the games in the Bronx. I think game 2, they very easily could have lost. That was the series that A-Rod was just a monster. He was phenomenal in that whole postseason. He had huge hits in every series. And then they won a very tough World Series after dropping the first game at home. That was the kind of Cliff Lee year where Cliff Lee was just unhittable. But the Yanks beat the Phillies in 6. And so 2 of the 3 times there was a new stadium, quote unquote, 66.7% for my dad, the accountant, who was very good at calculating on the fly, that they won a World Series. 2 of the 3 times they opened a new stadium of some form or fashion. April 23rd, 2009. I can't believe it's 16 years ago because I can still feel the drizzle that Dad and I encountered walking to the ballpark, and we were like, I don't know, are we going to get this game? We weren't like, oh, we shouldn't have driven here. We were happy we were there. We just hoped that the rain would hold off enough for them to play, and history tells us it did. And history tells us the Melkman delivered. The kind of controversial, because there were some people who said he was a terrible player and shouldn't have even ever been a starter. But I happen to like Melky Cabrera. He was a good outfielder, had a good throwing arm. He switch hit. He had power from both sides of the plate, and he was a character. So yeah, Melky hit a absolute bomb of a home run in the 14th of a game where at a number of points it looked like the Yankees were going to win. And the cliche, we went on to win the World Series. That was our first game, and we went on to win the 2009 World Series. 4/23/2009, my dear old dad and I attending our first game at new Yankee Stadium. This has been episode 496 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all so much for spending some of your hopefully happy hump day here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then, peace.